Hello, this Shabbos is Parshat Vayikra, a brand new book, and it's also a week before Pesach. Next Friday night, we'll be celebrating Shabbat HaGadol, but it's Erev Pesach. So it's Erev Pesach that starts on Shabbos. Got the whole new set of complications, but it's going to be beautiful. So, God willing, we'll be in Yerushalayim with Mashiach, but it's going to be beautiful no matter what, because that's how Pesach is. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful holiday. This parsha is Vayikra. Vayikra, we're introduced to the korbanot, the sacrifices. And the word korbanot comes from the word karov, which means close. So, a sacrifice is designed to bring us close to Hashem. It says in the Parsha, Ish ki yakriv mikem, a man who will sacrifice from himself. It could, typically in English or in Hebrew, it would have said, Ish mikem ki yakriv, a person from among you who will make a sacrifice. But it says, Ish ki yakriv mikem, a person that will bring from himself, that will bring a korban, will bring a sacrifice from himself. In other words, you're supposed to put your whole self into your service of Hashem. And it's interesting that it's the korbanot, the sacrifices were of animals, and they were the kosher animals, so not every animal. So our sages tell us that we learn from this that we have to take our animal self and use it in the service of Hashem. So the part of us that's like a bull, that is just assertive, aggressive, is just banging in and getting things done and not really caring what's in its way, we have to use that aspect of ourselves to serve Hashem. When something needs to be done for a mitzvah, we just need to bang through and be assertive and not let anything stop us. We need to be like that bull. So we need to use that aspect of our nature for holiness. Perhaps we have a part of our nature that's like a sheep. And a sheep is very submissive. They're a follower. They're not a leader. So we need to use that aspect of our nature also to serve Hashem. So a lot of times people are needed to get together to perform a particular mitzvah or to offer support, to take direction, to get a project done. So if the project is for holiness, then that nature of being like a sheep can definitely enhance that project and serve Hashem. So we need to take our animal nature, which is, animals are strong, they're energetic, they have a lot of power, and it's that power which we need to harness to serve Hashem. Now, of course, coming up next week, we are focusing on Pesach, and there was a very special korban, special sacrifice called the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice. So it tells us in the section of the Mishnah, which we read every day in davening, it says, when it tells us about all the different types of sacrifices, it tells us about the Pesach sacrifice, that it was different from all the others. So it says, HaPesach eno ne'echal ela balayla, ve'eno ne'echal ela ad chatzot, ve'eno ne'echal ela liminuyav, ve'eno ne'echal ela tzali. So unlike other sacrifices, which could be eaten during the day and at night, and they had a prescribed time period, the Pesach sacrifice could only be eaten at night. So it was shechted, it was slaughtered in the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan, but it wasn't roasted and eaten until it was completely dark, and it was at night. And it could not be eaten it could only be eaten until midnight. So once midnight, chatzot, had happened, that was it. No more eating the Korban Pesach. Now, one special thing about the Korban Pesach is that it had to be completely eaten. You can't leave anything over, and you couldn't break any bones. You had to eat all the meat, and you had to eat it all between darkness, and chatzot, the middle of the night, midnight. And as a result of this idea that you have to eat everything, you can't leave anything over. Now, with all the sacrifices, that was the idea. You're not supposed to leave anything over. It's supposed to all be eaten or burned. But the parts that were supposed to be eaten were supposed to be eaten and not left over. But they gave you a longer time period. Some were a day and a night. Some were 2 days and a night. A day and then a night and then a day. So they gave you a longer period, but the Pesach sacrifice was only one night until Chatzot, the middle of the night, and it could only be eaten by the members of its group. So every Korban Pesach, every animal had a group of people who signed up that they were going to be partaking of that Korban Pesach, and they had to be separated into groups. So you were not allowed to eat from anyone else's group. You had to eat only in your group, and there had to be enough meat that, people would get enough that would be considered eating, like a kazait. So that was something special about Korban Pesach. Everybody had to sign up for one. So everybody needed to eat one. It was absolute requirement to sign up for a Korban Pesach and eat some of that meat and be part of the group. And then the last thing, it had to be eaten roasted. Now, roasted is considered the most delicious, delectable way to eat meat, is roasted over the fire. You can just almost, you smell it and you taste it, and it's just the most delicious way. So on Pesach night, we are like kings, and kings would eat roasted meat. So that's why we have to eat it roasted. We're not supposed to eat it cooked in a liquid. No, it has to be eaten roasted, over the spit, over the fire. In fact, in our times, we have a little remembrance of this because we start the Seder when it's dark at night. And we're supposed to complete the eating of the afikoman, which is the final matzah, which is our representation of the Korban Pesach. We have to complete it by chatzot, by midnight. And we do not eat any roasted meat, okay? In fact, it's very important that for the nights of the Seder, the first 2 days of Pesach, you should only eat meat which has been cooked in liquid. So chicken or meat has to be cooked in liquid for you to eat it, and a lot of liquid, to make sure that the liquid doesn't burn down, so there's no liquid left, and then it's going to be roasted. So these are the things that we do even today, sort of as a result of these laws of the Korban Pesach. So this Korban Pesach is a very special sacrifice. Unlike all the other sacrifices, this was our first sacrifice that we were commanded to bring. And this was the sacrifice that really separated the Jewish people from the rest of the world. That Hashem said, take this lamb and take from the blood and paint it over your doorposts, and I will not come and bother your home when I go out to kill the firstborn in Egypt. So Hashem separated us through this Korban Pesach. Now there's a midrash that says that, it says Hashem, it's written in the Torah that Hashem said he brought us al kanfei yesharim, on the wings of eagles, out of Egypt. So the midrash says that what happened that night is that Hashem gathered all the Jews, as it were, on the wings of eagles and flew them to the Har HaBayit, to where the Beit HaMikdash would be built. And they offered the Korban Pesach, and they ate the Korban Pesach there, and he flew them back before midnight. And they stayed safe in their homes during the killing of the firstborn. And then the next morning they left with their matzahs on their backs and left Egypt and went out to follow Hashem through the desert and to receive the Torah and eventually come to Eretz Yisrael and to build the Mishkan in the meantime. So it says about the Korban Pesach in the Torah, it says, Al matzot u'marorim yochluhu, that it should be eaten with matzahs and marorim, maror, bitter herbs. And the matzahs remind us of the fact that they left in haste, and therefore they had the matzahs baking on their back. They didn't have time to let it rise, the dough rise. They just mixed it up, stuck it on their back in little cakes, and it baked in the sun. So they left in haste. And it's also matzahs, flat, representing humility, representing the fact that they just listened to what Hashem told them to do, and they followed it, and Hashem took care of them. And then the maror represents the bitterness of the slavery. It's interesting that the Gemara tells us that we should use chasa. It actually says chasa. Chasa means lettuce. So it's like a romaine lettuce. And the reason it says chasa means to care about someone, that Hashem cared about us. He listened to us, and that the chasa, the lettuce, it starts out pleasant, it starts out sweet, and as it grows and grows and grows, it gets tougher and tougher and more bitter. Now we know that the chasa part, the lettuce, is not that bitter. It's somewhat bitter. The part that we really get the bitterness from, to remember the bitterness of the slavery, is when we eat the chazeret, which is, not the chazeret, but the maror, which is the horseradish. Now that's very sharp. So we want to have both. We want to have the chasa, the lettuce, to remind us of what it says in the Gemara, that Hashem cared about us, and that the stay in Egypt started out sweet, but then became bitter. And then the horseradish is that sharp taste that when we eat it, we really feel a bitterness, and we can experience the bitterness of Egypt. And so we know that, first we eat the matzah, then we eat the maror separately, and then we put them together in a sandwich to represent that they would eat the matzah and the maror together when they had the Korban Pesach. So today we don't have a Korban Pesach. We have a little zroa, we have a little chicken bone on our Seder plate to remind us of the Korban Pesach. So some people take a piece of the Seder matzah, and many times from the afikoman, a little piece, and they'll put it in their wallet as a segula, as like a good luck charm in a way, to keep them healthy, because matzah is called bread of healing, okay? Our friend Dvar Marvi, she says she takes a piece of the afikoman and she puts it in her freezer, and throughout the year, if she has a headache, she breaks off a little piece and eats it. It's better than aspirin or any other thing to cure a headache. And there are many people who eat a little piece of the shmura matzah that they saved from the Seder every day throughout the year as a segula to keep healthy. So matzah is a food of healing. Now there was a story I want to tell you from the Holocaust. There was a very special rabbi, the Klosenberger Rebbe, that survived the war. His whole family perished. His wife and all of his children were killed, and he suffered very greatly, but yet he was amazing in uplifting the spirits of all of the other people in the camp with him, and afterwards the people in the DP camps. He was a great source of inspiration and uplifting and love. So there's a story about an inmate who was in the infirmary. He was in the hospital of the concentration camp, and he was very, very sick. He felt he's on his last days. And even in the infirmary, the hospital, they didn't give them much food. So, he was basically starving and thirsty. And the Klosenberger Rebbe came one day, it was a few days before Pesach, and he said to him, I want to tell you the halachas of Pesach. You're not supposed to eat chametz. And, you're supposed to, he went on and on about eating the matzah. And the inmate very weakly looked at him and he said, Rebbe, I would hope to get even a little piece of chametz that I could eat, that I could survive. So a few days later, very secretly, the Klosenberger Rebbe came back and he pulled out of his pocket a little piece of matzah. And he said, tonight is Pesach night. Eat this matzah. It was a miracle. So this sick person ate the matzah. He ate a piece of the matzah. And miraculously, the next day he felt much better. So he had saved a little bit, and he ate a little piece every day. And within a few days, within the 7 days of Pesach, he was back up. And he said, wow, this was a miraculous food of healing. It was just a little piece of matzah, and yet it brought him back to life. This powerful properties that matzah has. But what about the maror? Is the maror a food of healing? So our sages tell us, yes, even the maror is a food of healing. And there's another story about a man who was very, very sick, and his lung had collapsed, and he had fluid on his lungs, and at the time the doctors really didn't know what to do about it. And he went from doctor to doctor, and they told him, listen, we don't have any hope for you. You know, better you should go home, and your days are numbered, but at least you'll be home and you'll die in your, among your family, in your place. So he, on his way home, he stopped at his Rebbe, and he told him, listen, this is my situation. I don't know, Pesach is coming. I'm going to get home in time for the Seder. I feel like in my situation, I shouldn't eat the maror because it'll just make me sicker. The Rebbe looked at him and he said, the maror is a food of healing. You should eat the full portion of maror. He thought, oh, that's going to kill me if I eat the full portion of maror. He didn't really know what to do, This is what the Rebbe told him. Well, it got to be the Seder and got to be the part about the maror. And he took the piece of horseradish. He took a little piece, not the full kazait, the full ounce that you're supposed to eat, but a little piece. And he ate it. And he suddenly had a huge coughing attack. And his family is like, oh my goodness. And they ran to call the doctor. And he thought, okay, this is my last minute. I'm just going to eat the rest of the kazait because I at least want to die with the mitzvah of having eaten the maror, the whole kazait. And he ate the rest of the kazait, and he coughed and he coughed and he coughed until he basically was exhausted, and he lay down and he fell fast asleep after this huge coughing fit. And the doctor came and he found him sleeping. And he looked at him and he said, you know what? He looks like he's sleeping, and I think that'll be good for him. And he doesn't look like, there's anything I can do right now. So let's just let him sleep. Well, the man woke up and he's like, oh, I can breathe. Oh my goodness. That maror, he had caused him to cough, and he coughed out all the fluid that was in his lungs. And his lungs came back to their capacity, and he was better. So even the maror can have healing properties. In other words, these mitzvahs, now I'm not saying that this is like a doctor. Again, obviously, the Klausenberger Rebbe and this other man's Rebbe had sort of given them brachas that if they eat this, they'll be healed. So the bracha of a Rebbe is also very important here. Not trying to, say people should eat it if their doctor tells them not to. That's not my intention. But my intention is to say that these things that we eat at the Seder, the matzah and the maror, they can bring a physical healing. And in the Hayom Yom, it tells us because they're also called, the matzah is called a bread of faith, emunah. So if we have this proper emunah, it leads to a physical health. The spiritual health, which is emunah, leads to the physical health, which is the healing. And the maror also, all these special things that we were commanded, the Korban Pesach and the matzah and the maror, these were our special, special gifts given to us by Hashem. This whole Pesach experience of just the preparations for Pesach, and then sitting down on the Seder night and going through the Seder and eating the special foods and saying the prayers and reciting the Haggadah and the Manishtana and the Dayenu and all those things. These are the things that build our emunah and our connection to Hashem, to the Jewish people. We remember the trials and tribulations that the Jews went through in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, and also throughout all the generations. Bekol Adorot, Ledor Vador, all the generations since then until this day. And through it all, Hashem has been with us, and he will continue to be with us. We are his Am Segula and his Goy Kadosh. We are his special, treasured people and his holy nation. So this Pesach, as you sit down for your Seder, and God willing, it will be in Yerushalayim. It will taste the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb, with Mashiach, with the rebuilt Beit HaMikdash. But even if you sit down at your Seder in your home or at a friend's or wherever it may be, and we go through this, remember, you are in part of the Am Segula, the treasured people, and the Goy Kadosh, the holy people, the holy nation of Hashem. And I want to wish you a kosher Freilich and Pesach, and we'll speak to you. We'll see you again, God willing, after Pesach. Good Shabbos and Chag Sameach.